Welcome into this first episode of Razor Recap for the season, where we will be talking Arkansas UAPB from last night. But man, has Arkansas stopped scoring yet?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure Taylor Green hasn't stopped running. I think I saw him pass by my house a few minutes ago. He's kind of like Forrest Gump out there. He just ain't stopping.
Yeah, that's so true. So welcome in, guys, to the first Razor Recap of the season, brought to you by Scarlet Letter and our friends at Core Brewing, Arkansas's very own handcrafted spiked seltzer. Go check them out today in Northwest Arkansas, and we'll just dive right into it. Arkansas gets a big win in the season opener down in Little Rock, 70-0 over the UAPB Golden Lions. I think we expected a win, but to this extreme and this caliber, I think that shocked most people.
Yeah, it was the going 10 for 10 for me. 10 drives, 10 touchdowns is incredible. There's no FBS team that's done it in 20 years. And if everyone's like, well, it was UAPV, well, guess what? Other FBS teams play other FCS teams every single year, and they haven't done it in 2 decades. So it doesn't matter who the competition is. That's incredible. And then the other thing, it's just how disgustingly bad they whipped that O-line, right? That defensive line is mean. I don't know if you saw it, but on that first sack, they did double twist, and Eric Gregory is the one who got free. But on the other side, Cam Ball just destroyed that right tackle. Man, put him on the ground. To be fair, that right tackle, he couldn't be more than like 6'3", 280 pounds. Not a huge dude. Someone that they're not going to see for the rest of the season, that size at the offensive line. But it's just the ferocity that they came out with, that, reckless abandonment, that flying to the football type stuff that we saw kind of in 2021 with that defense. That's just kind of been missing since then.
Yeah, 100%. You hit it there when you said this D-line looked, really on top of things. And I think that's what we expected with the returners and the transfers we got in. You got Landon Jackson, Cam Ball back, both guys that, Landon Jackson had a great year last year. Everybody thought he would be gone. He's back. And then you bring in Anton Jukaj. You have Eric Gregory that's stepping up, and you have a young talent in Quincy Rhodes and Ian Gefford. So, and then not to mention, we'll talk more about it next week, but even today, Arkansas landed a 4-star defensive tackle out of Mississippi, one of the top players in Mississippi. And, Deke Adams and Travis Williams has this defensive side of the ball recruiting on a roll. So, I mean, you've got to love what they've done with this defense ever since Travis Williams has come in and kind of really turned this defense around to a more aggressive defense that blitzes a lot more and gets after the opposing line and quarterback.
Yeah, I'm the biggest Deke Adams believer, man. I believe that dude has built a foundation for which future coaches are going to be able to recruit defensive linemen. It's crazy. He's taken a position that has historically not done very well. We'll get 4-star every once in a while, 5-star in a game, Sosa Agim. But I mean, how many years is this? 4 years in a row he's got a 4-star guy. And usually it's one of the first people that commits to Arkansas. I mean, even in the 2025 cycle, Kadarius Kearns was one of the first to commit. And, that guy's big. And I think he could have played offensive line or defensive line, but he was the lead recruiter for him. So I'm a believer, man. I love that dude. He's awesome. But yeah, no. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think to me, not only that, but the fact that I don't know how much it was on him, but the fact that he was able to essentially recruit Landon Jackson to come back another season. Like, that's huge to be a big leader on this defense. Him and Cam Ball, guys that have experience, been there before. Like I said, combined with all these guys that we brought in, whether they're young talent or transfers. I think it's the perfect equilibrium, if you will, of that experience in returning with new coming talent.
Yeah. And before we get off of them, shout out to Nico Davier, man. Led the team in tackles. And every time I see him do great, I'm going to give him a shout out just because his dad disliked that one post I made. And it wasn't even a bad post. I was just saying he was going to have to battle for his spot. But that dude was killing it too. So we got two good defensive ends out there. And to be honest, I think everyone talks about Landon Jackson and Cam Ball having having next level ability, but man, Eric Gregory looks so good out there too. Man, that first sack, he ripped, and he was just so violent with his hands. It's something that you really hadn't seen out of him. And I mean, he's been there for like 6 years, right?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that has been around, and kind of everybody's been waiting for him to break out, and finally, maybe this is a year that he kind of really feels comfortable, if you will, and can, be able to contribute a lot more than, maybe what he has in the previous seasons.
And so to go a little bit further back, the linebackers did pretty good last night. We talked about how UAPB was going to stretch the field out and try to go out wide and beat them with speed or beat them with something tricky. And they countered it all night long. And another thing you saw with defensive ends and even defensive tackles getting out there too. That's what I was talking about. They're just flying around to the ball. They're trying to get 11 hats to the ball at the same time. So yeah, I am pleasantly surprised to see how well they did all the way down to like Bradley Shaw. I think Bradley Shaw got a sack last night too. The freshman,
Yeah, I think
I'm pretty sure he got a sack, and that's crazy. He got up, he was so pumped, and Arkansas is up 63-0 or something like that by this point. But it's cool to see those guys get those opportunities and to have those moments as a freshman in their first game, And then there's also Braylon Russell on the other side of the ball, got his first touchdown. You see, I don't know. It was overall just a great experience because you just got to go beat up on someone and you got to see the guys that you've been hearing about all summer long show out.
Yeah, that's true. And then, that's the thing I think I was glad to see is Arkansas went down, took care of business and some, and what we wanted to do. And then you dive into the stats a little bit, and you talked about seeing the linebackers, going side to side and working against those stretch plays that they tried to get. UAPB had a total of 7 rushing yards the entire game. That's it. 7. So, I think they did well containing the stretch play and not letting them get out wide and break off a big run. And I think that's what you wanted to see, especially from, like you mentioned, a young linebacking core that is the talent's there, but as far as game experience, not a lot of snaps under their belt. And, you mentioned too, some of the guys in tackles. The second leading tackler, Brad Spence, linebacker. So, you had Nico Davier, like you said, leading the team there. Steven Dix Jr., another one of those linebackers. TJ Metcalf up there in the 4th leading tackler. So, these young guys are out there. They're hungry, and, they're contributing to this defense a lot.
Yeah, and then let's go ahead and go on back to the secondary. Before we started the pod, we were talking about how the only thing we were concerned with them was a couple of breakdowns. We got lucky with with Higgins stepping out of bounds right there in the first half. And to be honest, it wasn't necessarily a breakdown of coverage. I feel like he went for the interception instead of going for the tackle or maybe the pass breakup. And like I said earlier, it was probably had to do a little bit with something that Giovanni Gibson at UAPB said. They wanted to prove that they were fast and they were going to kick some butt, and rub it in their face. It's DBs. That's how DBs act. That's how DBs think. The world's against them, and whenever they get anything going their way, they show out about it. So, and I love it. I love seeing that every day. But whenever it came to that, I feel like Gibson, for everything that happened last night, kind of did get in their head a little bit, maybe, and he did what he set out to do. Although I don't think he did very well on offense. Let's see.
2 receptions, 32 yards. That's it.
Receptions. Yeah, I think all of that came in the second half too. I don't think he got anything in the first half, but regardless, he got in their head a little bit, I think, and let's talk about most of those yards came in the second half against third string and walk-ons. So still, they did a fantastic job out there, and they were helped a lot by that defensive line. So
that's so true.
Great defensive performance all around yesterday.
I was about to say, when you dive into some of the team stats, you look at it for UAPB, they only had 10 first downs in the game. They were 1 for 10 on third down, 130 total yards, 123 passing, and like we said, 7 rushing. They had 23 rush attempts, so they were averaging 0.3 yards per rush. They had 5 penalties for 35 yards, and they only possessed the ball 27 minutes. When you flip over to the other side of that, Arkansas, 34 first downs, 9 of 9 on third down, 687 total yards, 408 passing, 11 yards per pass average, 279 rushing yards on 33 attempts, averaging 8.5 yards per rush. We did have 6 penalties for 48 yards. Pittman mentioned that in his post-game presser, and that's something that's probably going to get cleaned up as you get in the flow of things. This was the first game, so you're knocking off some rust, if you will, against live opponents. And we controlled the ball for 32 minutes and 15 seconds. So I think if you look at it, it was domination across the board there. I mean, to be expected, but to see the fact that, like we said, they are able to limit them to 7 yards rushing, under 150 total yards of offense altogether. When it goes back to, like you said, yes, it's an FCS team, but still the fact that Arkansas is able to go 10 for 10 on their drives for touchdowns, and then you're able to hold an opposing offense to under 150, 125 yards at that, that's still an impressive task for, even though they're an FCS team.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, like, they're still Division I, there's Division II and Division III, and then NAIA underneath that. It's not like they were playing scrubs, it's not like they were actually playing high schoolers. So these guys are talented. They're talented enough to be D1. So let's back off that just a little bit. But yes, they went out there and took care of business exactly like we hoped they did. And if you're thinking you're still not convinced by that, look at last year against Western Carolina. They beat them, but at that point, we all knew there was something wrong. You're right. We saw the offensive line kind of get beat a few times. Reed's not making sense with KJ Jefferson. The defense the defense I think did pretty good against Western Carolina, but we just knew something was wrong at that point. There's a few things that I'm probably going to bring up when you start talking about offense in a minute, but for the most part, there's not a whole lot that was wrong, and that's good. It's not necessarily telling us anything about this team yet, but it's telling us that it's not as bad as it was last year. So that's good.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, it's hard to that you can't really take anything out of this game, and it usually in games like this, if you take anything out of it, it's more negative things. And I don't think there's really any giant negative things or glaring issues out of this game. Yeah, there's a few things that you want to fix, but it's the first game of the season. That's what you're going to find out. Things that need to be tweaked a little bit or things like that. And you mentioned offense, so let's jump right in there and start talking about quarterback play. Taylor Green, per a Bobby Petrino offense, decides to take a big shot, first play of the game, throws into some wind, underthrows the ball a little bit on what would have been a big play to Tyrone Broden. Other than that, that first drive, a little bit iffy, but he got things cleaned up. Went for the entire game 16 of 23 for 229 yards, 2 touchdown passes with a QBR of 92.2.
Yeah, so those first 2 plays, man, I was getting sick to my stomach. You saw that, and he was wide open too. I mean, it would have been a touchdown if it had been on target. And so seeing it get underthrown like that, which if that were to happen against Oklahoma State or anyone else on the rest of the schedule, that's going to be an interception 99 out of 100 times. But also Quentin Jackson fumbling the ball on the second play, I was like, oh man, it's going to be one of those games, isn't it? And then they started to pick it up, and they composed themselves more. For Green, there are some accuracy issues, right? He threw behind guys. There's a couple of decision-making issues too. I don't know what it was. I think they did the exact same play twice, and either Broden dropped it the first time, or I can't remember what happened the first time. Incompletion. It was just a slant on the right side. And then they ran the exact same play, and instead of making the read, he assumed I think he assumed it was going to be there. And to be honest, if he could have made it in that window, it probably could have been a reception. It just didn't happen. And it was like 3 guys all at once right there. So there's a few things like that. I mean, this is just nitpicky. Other than that, great game, right? I mean, you asked Clint Sterner. He I don't know if you saw that on Twitter. He pretty much came out and was like, I think Malachi Singleton should be the number 1 quarterback. And I'm like, I mean, they're both really good. I definitely don't feel as bad as I have in the last 3 years about the situation at quarterback. But I don't know. There's the game making ability that Green brings to the table that I don't think you can take away. Right.
Yeah.
That 5-yard run right there at the end of the half. I went back and I counted his steps. I know I'm super weird, but I was like, this man is taking the longest strides I've ever seen. So I went back and I counted from the 45 until he made a touchdown, and it was 36 steps. Well, 36 steps in 45 yards, that's not incredible. But you got to think, he also crossed the entire field, and that's about 53 more yards. So he did about 36 steps in around 90 yards, give or take, right? That's about 2.5 yards a stride. Olympic sprinters, I looked all this up because I was like, no way, that's got to be crazy. Olympic sprinters do about 6 feet. So he was doing about 7.5 feet. So about 1.5 feet more. That's insane, man. And he's not slow either. He just kind of glides, and he runs almost effortlessly. Like last year, or not last year. So Rocket Sanders in the past, the first thing I noticed about them is it looked like he was hurting when he was running. He just kind of, especially as a freshman, he was just kind of like if you go back and look at that touchdown he had against Texas, the man's just kind of like this. And Taylor Green's opposite, smooth. I mean, just like almost like a robot. And he's deceptively fast. And that game making ability, or that game breaking ability, you can't take off the field, man.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's one of those things where now, after seeing that, teams are going to have to start kind of planning that, because like if you bring the house on a rush, he gets away, he's gone. I mean, you're not catching him. But then also, I think he's got enough of playmaking ability with his arm that, you sit back, he'll find that read and put it in there. So, I think comparatively, when you look at Talon versus KJ in the past, Talon's one of those guys where KJ was more of, I'll just run you over. Whereas Talon's more of one of those guys that I'm just going to outrun you and run around you instead of through you, and be more agile and, you get a guy on a cut or something like that. And I think that's the difference you see between, they're both athletic guys, both guys that, could escape out of, dangerous situations or pressure, but they both do it in different ways. And I think that's what we saw last night in the effortless run, like you said, that Talon had right before half. And I think that's just an amazing part of his game that, we didn't really get to see up until now, just because in practice, they didn't really let a live play like that go. I mean, you saw some
Right.
highlights from Boise State last year, but to actually see this in person with him here this year, that's just another arsenal to his, playbook that he's got that they can, scheme up, if you will, or even if it's not schemed up, if a play breaks down, now you don't have to worry about him, having that issue.
Yeah. So whenever whenever it first came out that he was coming to Arkansas, first thing I do, look at highlights. And there's one, I think it was against Utah last year or it was his freshman year. I can't remember. But he took like a 90-yard touchdown to the house to seal a win for Boise State. And when I saw that, just instantly in my mind, I was like, Matt Jones. That's what I mean. I don't think he's got 4.2 speed like Matt Jones did, but just the way that he could just deceive people with his speed, because everyone took bad angles, right? It didn't matter who it was; they were taking bad angles, and he just ran by him. So yeah, no, I'm also, while you were saying he's just going to run around you, that first little move he made on that 45-yard run or 40-yard run, however long it was, he he kind of like snaked his way through there. Kind of looked like have you ever seen a ferret before? Like what played with a ferret, watched them move through stuff, or one of my mom's friends had one, and it had this little play set that it would kind of sneak through, and it was so fast. It would just go through there all the time, just playing, around, and it would just do that same kind of movement. So he's kind of ferret-like when it comes to like the way he gets around people. Not the way he looks. That's we're not going to go there, but still, it's cool to see the difference between KJ and Green like that. Now, whenever you come into when you talk about passing, I think KJ might have had a step on him on accuracy. People are probably going to be mad at me with that, but I think Green will take more shots than KJ. Right.
And to this point
the problem
here,
with
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say this point here,
Yeah.
That, as far as pressure and being pressured, KJ didn't have as many quick decisions as like you saw Talon. He got pushed out of the pocket. He looked downfield real quick and then he takes off. He's not standing there trying to wait to see if a guy is going to get open. That quick decision. It's incredible that he had that ability, and I think it's something that Arkansas fans didn't see with KJ as far as quick decisions being made, especially last year. And I think that's something else that is going to be great for Green and in this Petrino offense.
Yeah, I think it was more so last year than the years before. And to be fair, I think it was more because he had to think about it. He had to think about the reads because Kendall Browse, his offense is one read, two reads, not their takeoff. That's why whenever you have the veer and shoot or whatever type of veer and shoot it is, it's a variation of a veer and shoot. I just can't remember what exactly, but to do that, you have to have an athletic quarterback because if it breaks down, you got to go. But whenever you get into a pro style offense like Enos, you got to make different reads. And I think he was trying to do that, trying to prove himself, that he can be a quarterback like that and maybe be a quarterback at the next level. That he just didn't he was not nearly as fast as he was in the years prior. With Green, I feel like for the most part, he's kind of got this offense. We didn't see a whole lot in terms of variety, but whenever we did see him like do a play action, like that play action pass to Ty Washington for that dime, oh my gosh, off his back foot, away from his throwing arm, running. That's incredible.
Well,
That someone
especially
can make that throw.
yeah, especially and when you think about that, that play that he had at the goal line, not the big run, but his other rushing touchdown that was, right around the 5 or so, he really sold that handoff and he
Yeah.
literally walked into the end zone. Like no effort at all. He just like couple steps, touchdown because he sold that play action really well. And I think that's something that, is one of those intangibles, if you will, on how well like a guy can sell the play. Because if you don't sell it well, it doesn't matter if it's a read option or not. He's not walking into the end zone. And so I think
Right.
that's big for him. And talking about these other two quarterbacks from what we saw in the second half, Malachi Singleton going 8 for 10 for 120 yards and a rushing touchdown of his own. And then you had KJ Jackson come in that fourth quarter, and him being a lefty at that went for 59 yards. And, I think all three of these guys fit the Petrino offense well. It'll be interesting to see, it looks like we could be, set for the future in quarterback play. From what we saw, you can't take too much from this, but I liked what I saw from all of these quarterbacks as far as how they came out and executed in this game. And I mean, I think overall, great play. And Taylor did what we talked about, what we wanted to see. Didn't overly do too much, but came out, had a clean game, no turnovers, 229 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, rushed for 88 on the ground for 2 touchdowns. That's a good day for your first, game with a new team and under a new offense as well.
Yeah. Especially with KJ Jackson coming out there. I didn't expect a whole lot for him, but for him to go 4 for 4 and almost 60 yards, that's great. And it looked like the person he loved the most was Harrison out there, my hero, living my dream. By the way, did you see him just absolutely manhandle that kid from UAPB? Yeah, have you ever seen that I think it's Kramer from Jerry Seinfeld. I saw someone post I think that's what it is. They posted a GIF of him going after a kid in karate, and it was like what's his name? Monte Harrison going after that kid from UAPB last night or something like that. And I'm like, oh, that's so funny. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. But yeah, no, that was great to see him. But let's talk about these receivers for a second, man. Isaac Tesla leads the team in yards, 53 yards. We had, let us count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 people get one catch. That's crazy, man.
Spreading the ball around. And that's to say the fact that you didn't even have Andrew Armstrong play in this game. That was a real possibility from Pittman's press conference early in the week. He said he's still dealing with that toe issue and said that he could be available but wouldn't start. Well, we didn't see him at all, but that makes me feel even better because we have the depth behind him. Yes, I want Armstrong to play 100%, but the fact that, we were able to hold him out of that game, to let him get healthy for next week and still not have an issue with receivers, like you said, Tesla quietly led the team. Like, I was surprised what he did, especially that one-handed catch in the second half.
Boy,
talk about
man,
an athletic play.
He's got to do like witchcraft or voodoo or something. I don't know how that man does that stuff. I don't know if you saw the pregame clip, but he was catching kickoffs and he
catching
caught one-handed. Yeah, he just goes, and I'm like, wait a second, that wasn't a spiral. That was end over end. What the heck? That's one point I want to bring up. So last year, especially with these receivers, we had a lot of talk and a lot of hyping up, and you're like, well, Tesla, he's a human fly trap. He's going to catch everything one hand. It doesn't matter. That didn't happen last year. Oh well, Tyrone Broden's this fast, tall guy. He's going to be open down the field all the time. That didn't happen. Guess what happened? Tyrone Broden, first play, wide open down the field. Going, I mean, that dude's fast. Doesn't make any sense how he's that tall and that fast. Isaac Tesla over there, just like it's effortless. It looks like it's effortless whenever he goes up for a one-handed catch. So seeing that, it's like it was Enos. That's what I thought. I was like, it was Enos. These guys are good.
Right,
But
100%.
that's an overreaction. But still, it's cool to actually see that out on the field instead of just seeing clips from practice or highlight videos from the past.
Right, and you can't forget about Jordan Anthony as well. The transfer from Texas A&M that everybody talked about. He was fast. He's a very similar build to Isaiah Satania. He's only 5'10". He comes out, catches 3 balls for 46 yards, and like Pittman said in his post-game press conference, they unfortunately didn't get to try to run the sweep with him, but with the speed he's got, I mean, you just add that on top, man. And then, like you said, Broden out there, 3 catches, 35 yards in that touchdown play. You had Luke Haas, 3 catches, 42 yards. Ty Washington had that great play for 23 yards. Taylor Green just put it in the bucket for him. And Monte Harrison, the guy you were just talking about, 2 catches for 29 yards. Satania, 1 big catch for 34 yards. And then, you had other guys get involved. Cross Johnson, 2 catches.
Shamar Easter get 1.
Shamar Easter, Rodney Hill.
Yeah.
Davion Dozier. So you have a plethora of weapons here, which, is amazing. But then you flip over that, you've got these fantastic receivers. But, man, what about this running back room? I tell you, Jaquindon Jackson is a beast. 8 carries for 101 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaging 12 yards a carry. Again, temper expectations. It is an FCS team, but still, you have 100 yards in the first half of a game. This man's ready to come in the SEC and show out. You had Taylor Green, like we said, had 88 yards rushing. Tyrell Reed, 28 for 1 touchdown. Braylon Russell got himself a touchdown in his first collegiate game. You even had Rashad Dubinion out there getting a few carries, even though, they're kind of nursing that groin injury he has. Rodney Hill, 4 carries, 15 yards. KJ Jackson had
one. Got a carry?
Apparently so. I was looking at that. I didn't catch that. But if you got to that point, I wouldn't be surprised if near the end of the game they're like, why not get him out there? Let him run it.
Hey, who knows, man?
That's
crazy.
It seems like there's depth in several of these skill positions. And it was on display. And I think the biggest thing here, you're looking at this, our offensive line did what they were supposed to. I didn't have any major concerns. I didn't see, there wasn't any major breakdowns where the pocket just absolutely collapsed on Taylor, just like it did last year with KJ. There's a couple times where you got some pressure, but that was after he had the ball 3 to 4 seconds, which was twice as long as KJ had last year. So, the fact that I think that was the most satisfactory thing for me was the O-line's performance here.
Yeah. Go back to Jaquindon Jackson real quick. Yeah, he's got the stuff to show out in the SEC this year, but he also got that Riz, bro. Did you see that? After that long touchdown, he goes over and he's like, hey, to the UAPB cheerleaders. Man, that's some confidence. But jokes aside, man, yeah, I'm telling you, he's got that B button. He makes it look easy whenever he does that spin move. The cool thing, or the thing I like about him the most, is something that I have a pet peeve of with just running backs in general. Is that when they do make moves like that, they decide to go west and east. They don't go north and south, right? one of my favorite running backs all the time, probably one of my favorite running backs ever is Walter Payton. And it didn't matter what kind of move he was doing, he was going forward, right? He was trying to go forward. And that's what Jaquindon Jackson does. Whenever he does those spin moves, if you look at him, he's tilted, right? He's tilted towards the end zone, and he doesn't ever lose momentum with that stuff. And so that's the attitude I want to see out of a running back. Someone that's like, I'm trying to get those yards. I'm not trying to outmove you. I mean, I will do that. I'll run you over. But we're going north and south, right? We're not going sideline to sideline. And all
that's
these
one
other
thing.
guys.
Yeah, that's one thing you saw with Jaquindon Jackson. He displayed those two aspects of his game. There was one instance where he ran over a guy, but there's another instance where he hit the hole, 2 cuts, and he was gone. So like he can do both. He can run over you, or he can just outmaneuver you, like you were saying, while maintaining that going north and south. So that was fantastic by him, that he has both those aspects to his running styles.
Yeah, it's crazy to see him. He's kind of like that all-purpose guy, right? He can just do it all. But then you go like the big guy like Russell, he's still his touchdown, I don't think anybody touched him. And like you were talking about, I think that was due to the offensive line just bullying that defensive line of UAPB. Like I said earlier, there's not a lot you can take from like good wise because who the opponent is, but one of the things that you can take from this entire team, not just the offensive line, like I'm about to talk about, is the attitude, right? You can see that. You can see that they came out with a plan. They came out with a mission, and they came out with a much better attitude and effort than they have in the past couple of years. And that's what you saw with the offensive line. The person that stood out to me the most was Keyshawn Blackstock. One, I didn't realize that man was that big, and he's got like this cowboy collar thing. It's not like like they did in the 80s,
not the
90s,
full like big linebacker collar, but
right. But man, he looks scary. he's out there. He's like running down people. I don't remember what play it was, but I think Taylor Green. No, it's Jaquindon Jackson's touchdown in. Well, with the camera, it was on the right end zone. Don't know if it's north or south or what, but he was out there and he's running after people. I'm like, gosh, if I saw that running after me.
And that's the thing you didn't see with this offensive line last year, where they were getting to the second level and getting blocks for these running backs. Talon, when he did have those, quarterback scrambles or whatever, you saw some of these offensive linemen getting to the second level, getting blocks on some linebackers, and you didn't see that whatsoever last year. They were lucky last year to just hold their block on, their initial defensive lineman or whoever was blitzing or bringing pressure. So, that, like you said, that was fantastic to see them getting out there and getting some additional blocks on those plays. Yeah.
Speaking of Blackstock, that long run that Jaquindon Jackson had, where he went and waved at the cheerleader, that was sprung by Blackstock. He was the backside tackle, and he was responsible for getting up to the second level and sealing off that running lane. And I mean, perfect. It was a beautiful play. And just seeing someone like that, which in my mind, as much as I've seen them, I was thinking that he was probably the number 5 or 4 guy out of the 5 on the team. But watching him in action in the game, like Sam Pittman said the other day, they're different players in practice and in a game. Seeing him in a game, it's making me really like this offensive line, even though they still got a lot of stuff to prove next week against Oklahoma State.
Yeah, 100%. So, a good question here from Dustin. He said, sharing the ball is nice when you start talking about receivers, but would it be better to feel like you had 3 or 4 that are going to be your wide receiver group leaders. Kind of unsettling not knowing what the 2 to 5 guys are after Armstrong. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think they know who these guys are going to be. I mean, of course, you've got Armstrong as your number one. Unfortunately, he didn't play. But I think behind him, your top 4 is going to be – it's got to be Tesla, Satania, and Broden. Maybe throw Anthony in there. But, I think that's where you're going to be sitting when you think about your top 3 to 4 guys you're going to have that are going to rotate in.
First of all, shout out to Dustin. That's my buddy from college. I don't know if you remember I was talking about whenever we talked about War Memorial Stadium and having a friend who's ardently for it, like, almost violently for it. That's him. So nice seeing you, buddy. But yes, no, you want to have those guys solidified, right? You want to have the type of talent they have behind them. I think they have behind them. But you want to have a hierarchy whenever it comes to receivers. You want to have that wide receiver 1 guy because, obviously wide receiver 1's going to have that playmaking ability that the other ones don't. But that's also going to take more eyes off the other guys. So whenever you have someone that sticks out more than the rest, it gives opportunity for other receivers to breathe, if that makes sense. And you don't want to have a whole, 10 guys catching passes like this every single game. But I think more or less it's important to have that hierarchy where one guy stands out more than the rest.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if you look at the box score after next week, the number of guys listed is easily going to be in half.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think this was more or less feeling out some of those other guys that are younger guys or, guys that might be able to step up in the case of potential, knock on wood, you don't want to see it, injuries happen, just like we saw Armstrong didn't play. Your number 1 didn't play. So, right. You look at guys that could, be able to step up. You got your Jordan Anthony, your Monte Harrison. We even saw, unfortunately didn't catch it. CJ Brown got in there and almost had a nice ball thrown to him there. And so, and some of these guys, you look at it, they were guys out of the backfield, the passes to these running backs, not truly active receivers, if you will. So when you think about it, I think we know, and the coaching staff knows who those main 3 to 4 are. And I think you saw it just last night, getting these guys in, getting them some snaps and kind of feeling out, what you got depth-wise and potential for the next few years or so.
Yeah, I think the only back that actually caught a ball with a route, and there might have been a flare or two or something out wide, but I don't remember. The only one I remember specifically seeing was Rodney Hill, and he had some kind of crossing route in front. And but yeah, they might throw that out more. They might put the backs on some routes, but I don't know. Maybe they were playing cards closer to the chest this week. Obviously they were, but maybe that's one thing you'll see more next week. I don't know, but yeah, I think they'll use the backs enough, at least in screen passes, stuff like that. But yeah, no, like Devion Dozier is probably not going to get a whole lot. I think he might get a reception every game or two. Shamar Easter is probably not going to get a whole lot of playing time.
You can't forget about Luke Haas. He's going to be a big factor this year too.
Oh yeah, no, like that kid. Shoot, I don't want to say it, but he could be like he could. I made the prediction. I think he's probably going to have the most. He's probably going to lead the SEC in receiving yards for tight ends. I think he will. I mean, he's got 42 in 3 catches. That's crazy. 14 yards.
14 yards a catch.
And that's basically what he was doing last year before he got hurt. So,
Yeah, I was about to say you saw him kind of really start to break out last year, and unfortunately, he had that injury against A&M with his shoulder collarbone issue. But it doesn't look like he's missing a step this year. And not to mention, I think he's improved it. He put up some nice blocks yesterday too for some of these running backs.
Yeah, he kind of looks a little thicker. He's starting to get a more of a tight end build. People want to at the beginning of the year, people were kind of comparing him to Brock Bowers. And Brock Bowers was so in high school we didn't have tight ends, right? Our offense was super simple. It was like spread, but we hardly had tight ends like big, strong blocking tight ends. We had more like bigger receivers, maybe slower receivers that could also had enough meat on the bones so they could block every once in a while. And we called them an S, so someone that was right behind the tackle. They were off the ball, they weren't on it. And that's kind of what Brock Bowers was. So everyone wants to say he's a tight end. He's kind of a tight end to me. Maybe they'll put some more weight on him in the NFL, but I think Hawgs could legit be that tight end type of body and have more of an effect in the running game than we thought before. I mean, that's why they brought in Andre Pasca. Is it Andre Pasca?
I think it's Andreas Pasca.
Andreas Pesca. They brought him in because that dude was massive. I don't know if you saw him out there. Apparently, he played soccer growing up, so he's got some. Apparently, he's got some moves. We'll see if he ever gets a catch. But yeah, I think they might be good with Luke Hawgs out there blocking.
I was about to say, yeah. I mean, overall, like you said, you can't take too much from this game, but I think we saw what we wanted to see, or what you should see in a game like this. Like you said, next week against Oklahoma State, it's going to be a total different thing. But we'll get to see what they do on Saturday as they do play South Dakota State, or is it North Dakota State? One of the top teams in FCS from last year. And we know historically Oklahoma State does not start out strong as far as their first few games of the season. That's what you saw. I think they showed the scores from their past like first 4 games of every year. And each year that first game is a little bit of a struggle. We'll see if that's the same this year. But, I will say it's nice having this game on Thursday where, Pittman said in his post game, they bust back last night. They got off today. They're going to go through a little bit of practice tomorrow morning, and, they'll be done right before the Oklahoma State game gets started. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of those guys sit down all together and kind of watch this game and start some early scouting.
I'll guarantee you they will. They might have a projector up. Or how
just a big old watch scouting party at the football center there.
Yeah. And I don't expect for OSU to really struggle a whole lot. But we did see this week, yesterday, like North Carolina State struggle against Western Carolina. That's who we played last year. So maybe they were just better than what we thought they were last year. But watching them struggle and like Colorado struggle, I think they actually played North Dakota State, didn't they?
Yeah, they got South
or Colorado, South Dakota. Okay, yeah. I think North Dakota State and South Dakota State are like 1 and 2 FCS. I know that I don't know what it is about like the Dakotas and Minnesota and Montana up there, but their FCS teams and their like Division II teams are good. They just flock to the colder weather, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's something. So yeah, last year you had South Dakota State. They won the FCS National Championship, runner-up Montana. But if you look at the past, every year since 2011, other than 2 years, it's been either North or South Dakota State winning the FCS championship, with the exception of 2016 with James Madison and 2020 with Sam Houston. Other than that, you go to the list starting from 2011 going forward: North Dakota, North Dakota, North Dakota, North Dakota, James Madison, North Dakota, North Dakota, and then the past 2 years you've had South Dakota. So,
right. And North Dakota State has probably one of the best offensive lines outside the FBS. Not probably, they do. I don't know why, just year in and year out, they've got probably FBS level talent going there for some reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe they're just getting overlooked, but they're getting dudes up there. I don't remember his name, but he's got the coolest picture for, whenever they do the lineup. He was the one, the redheaded kid, long hair, and he's missing his front two teeth. Oh man, that was hilarious. Love that kid. He got drafted last year, I think. I don't know who
he plays for the Bucks.
That's right. I still think he's missing those teeth.
Yes, 100% there. But yeah, like you said, you saw North Dakota State play Colorado last night. We'll see South Dakota State take on Oklahoma State tomorrow. I believe that game kicks off at, let's see, that game will be kicking off
1 o'clock, right?
At 1 o'clock, yes.
Yeah.
And, the spread for that game is Oklahoma State's only favored by 10 in this game, with the points total 53.5. So, it'll be an interesting game to see. Like I said, with historically Oklahoma State starting slow in their previous 4 seasons, I believe. We'll have to see if that trend continues or if it's different this year. But yeah, can't wait. We'll break into that preview as we get closer to next week, and we have our show later in the week. But anything else, on your mind from the game last night before we get out of here?
Just like Sam Pittman said, it's Bobby Petrino, man. And
100%.
it's Travis Williams. I can't throw him out, man. I love that dude. So I think they got some really good offensive coordinator or just coordinators. And I think they might surprise some people. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean, by the gallon. So yeah, I'm excited to see next week, man.
Yeah, next week is where the true test, happens, and it's the real measuring stick, if you will, to kind of compare ourselves to, an Oklahoma State team that, is projected to be one of the top 2 teams that will be competing for the Big 12. But yeah, they get an extra few days to prep for them, with us playing on a Thursday night, get an off day tomorrow, getting back to it on Saturday, watching some film or the game. And then, after the game next week, as they break that film down for scouting purposes and more in depth. But, I'm ready to see what this team does and, how they come out and fare in their first true road test against, a bigger, Power 4 conference team. So, until then, we'll be back next week with our regularly scheduled show, and we'll start breaking down the Oklahoma State matchup, and we'll keep you guys up to date with any other Arkansas news we hear between now and then. But until next time, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.